What are teams doing? That's an interesting topic. Should QBs ask to be traded? And so I there was one day I kind of thought about all the quarterbacks that haven't, made the Super Bowl, that go to the playoffs, but, just don't go to the Super Bowl, or haven't been to the Super Bowl. And then there's quarterbacks that have been to the Super Bowl, but have not won the Super Bowl, and has, not, since then, just not really, and nothing against them. In fact, they're really good quarterbacks, but, you see in the NBA, even the best players are sometimes, asking to be traded, or the best, players, in the NBA will, go to different teams. And so that kind of got me to thinking, and that's, why I'm asking this question, should, quarterbacks, ask to be traded? And then you also see, quarterbacks that have gone to different teams, like Sam Darnold, who, went from the Vikings, to Seattle, and he's won a Super Bowl. And so the question here is should, quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, or Josh Allen, ask to be traded, or should they consider, during the off season, or, when their contract is over during the off season, consider, maybe going to a different team, or maybe Dak Prescott. I know he's not, I wouldn't necessarily put him in the top tier quarterbacks, but he's still, fairly elite. And so it's just interesting, because you take Lamar Jackson and you take Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is on an outstanding offense, but the defense in Cincinnati is just not going to get him to another Super Bowl. Now, yes, the Cincinnati Bengals, they can, beef up their defense, but is that still going to be enough? You take Lamar Jackson, the receivers that he has, yeah, they're good receivers, but there are teams that have better receivers, like the Cowboys. How would Lamar Jackson fit if the Cowboys, maybe they traded for Lamar, or Lamar said, you know what, I'm going to hit the free market, and the Cowboys said, you know what, we're going to free up cap space, without, getting rid of our, receivers that we have. And, you see Lamar I believe somebody like Lamar Jackson, being on the Dallas Cowboys with the receivers that Dallas, has. And yeah, you can make the argument that Lamar Jackson has, a tight end, a better tight end that Dallas has, or maybe the running back, is better. But, you look at Dallas, how they have two really good, receivers that you could just feed them the ball all day long. And so I would like to see Lamar Jackson play, on a team that has receivers like that. And so just to, just to think about that. And then the same goes, for, Josh Allen, is like, what can these quarterbacks do? Cause yeah, they can win MVPs, and things like that. But you see, like, in the NBA, where Michael Jordan has been able to do everything. You see, Peyton Manning, he was able to win MVP and still get, 2 Super Bowls. And you also see, where Tom Brady, how many Super Bowls did he win and how many MVPs, so you can do everything, and I want to see these quarterbacks, do everything. I want, and, I just, is it, good for teams to, I know they're really good quarterbacks. It's hard to let go of them, but, and I'm not knocking those quarterbacks. Maybe they should, go to different teams. So now let's talk about what teams, that you look on paper can make a push for the Super Bowl, or maybe not necessarily on paper, but you're just looking at the roster. What teams can make a Super Bowl run, and which teams aren't going to make a Super Bowl run. Let's start out with teams that I think that, are probably going to go to the playoffs, but they're not going to make a Super Bowl run. And I'm going to say the Bills and the Ravens. They're 2 teams that are going to make the playoffs. They're not going to, and it's possible that the Ravens are going to make it back to the playoffs, but I do not see them as a team, making it to this, and the Bills as well. I just don't see them, going, making a Super Bowl appearance. I know the question is make a Super Bowl push, but that's kind of what I'm going towards, is making a Super Bowl appearance. Those 2 teams, I just don't see it. It doesn't matter, what coach they have. I just don't see it. Nothing against their offense, nothing against the quarterbacks that they have. I mean, you just look at the history. The history says it all. They're just not a team that's going to, and then you can say the Cowboys fit in that, category as well. They're just not a team that's going to, no matter who is on their roster, they're just, and whoever's the head coach, they're not going to go to this. You just gotta look at it's the same story year in, year out, never different. And so, if you hate what I say, come at me, whatever. I just don't see it year in and year out. And then the Chargers, it just doesn't seem like it matters, who's on their roster. Those teams, they might make the playoffs, but that, when it's said and done, are they going to make a Super Bowl appearance? Probably not. Let's look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Are they going to make a Super Bowl appearance this year? It might be close. They've made Super Bowl appearances with their quarterback that they have, and many different players on their squad. And so I do believe that the Philadelphia Eagles could be a team that possibly could, make a Super Bowl appearance. Now, will they? That's an iffy, that's just really iffy. You look at the Seattle Seahawks. Will they, make another Super Bowl appearance? I don't know. We've seen teams make back-to-back Super Bowl appearances before, so it's not uncommon. It's just, do they still have, and then, who did they lose? They lost their running back, but like, who else did they lose? Can they, do they still have a roster to make it back to, back-to-back Super Bowl appearances? I believe they do. And then you look at the Patriots. I think the Patriots are going to make another run. A really good team. They just got better. I think the Patriots, their roster just got better. And then another team that I want to look at is the Denver Broncos. They're another iffy team that might make the AFC Championship and might make that game very, very interesting. And they might, just pull it off. They didn't go out and get a whole lot, but do they really need to? Do I agree or disagree? I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so I clearly disagree with, there's an analyst on, ESPN, not going to say the name, but and this was when they were talking about the top 10 quarterback for last season. And, in the top 10, I don't agree with the top 10 whatsoever, but that's for another segment. In the top 10, they have Joe Burrow in front of Lamar Jackson. And one of the things is that the analyst from ESPN said that Lamar Jackson is better than Joe Burrow. Now, Joe Burrow is my favorite quarterback, but is he better than Lamar Jackson? It's kind of, you can make an argument for both quarterbacks, but I do not agree with, what this analyst said. He's like, oh, Joe Burrow, yeah, he's made a Super Bowl, but he hasn't won. Well, Lamar Jackson has not made a Super Bowl. Yes, Lamar Jackson has won MVP and Joe Burrow has not, but here's the thing. I believe the NFL is completely biased and disrespecting Joe Burrow, because I do believe in 2024 Joe Burrow should have, you just look at his stats. He had less interceptions than Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, more touchdowns than those two, and more receiving completions, or, yards. And so, you just look at, what Joe Burrow, did in that season. Like, the Bengals had more gains, they had more gains, they balled out that season. Did they have a winning season? Did they make the playoffs? No. But that's not a reason to take your eyes off of somebody who should have been MVP. Because it's not like Joe Burrow was injured that season. He he balled out all season, and it's just, completely biased there. So, I kind of disagree with what was said about Joe Burrow. And then the fact that he has the nerve to say that Lamar Jackson is, when completely the list has to do with the 2025 season.
Bewley is Unleashed.
Okay, so I have a problem with the top 10 quarterback list. Okay, yes, they put the Patriots quarterback in the top 10. He should be there, but I mean, for a quarterback that goes to the Super Bowl, shouldn't he be higher on that list? And then also, you're gonna put Patrick Mahomes not only in the top 10, but you're gonna put him at number 2. I mean, did they make the playoff? Let me hear anybody, come on. Did they make the playoffs? No, they did not make the playoffs. And look, Joe Burrow is my favorite quarterback, but what did he do except for be injured basically in the entire season? Why are you putting, somebody that has been injured through basically the entire season in the top 10 quarterback list? There are other What about Baker Mayfield? What did he do? I mean, all he did was throw touchdowns all season. And why did they not put his name in the top 10? Why did they not put Sam Darnold? I mean, I don't know. All he did was win a Super Bowl. So the list sounds very, very, biased. It sounds like the NFL alone, the NFL coaches, the NFL executives, all they did was put their favorite quarterbacks. They just said, okay, what's the top 10 favorite quarterbacks? And they just made a list of their top 10 favorite quarterbacks. And just so they're not too biased, they threw in names like Kalen Williams, which he's, maybe at 10, but there are other quarterbacks, like maybe Jalen Hurts could have been, at 10, and not to knock what was done, what Kalen Williams did, but just to, maybe I would have had him maybe at 11, or, maybe just slightly outside of the top 10, and then like putting, we can't have Patrick Mahomes at number 1, but we're still going to have him at number 2 because he's our favorite. We can't, slide our favorite quarterback outside the top 10. We can't have that. Throwing hair back, talk to the hand. Like, no, come on. Get with it. Get real. What are the true top 10 quarterback list? Sam Darnold would be in there. Baker Mayfield would be in there. Josh Allen would be a little further down that list. Jordan Love would be in there. Bo Nix would be in there. And so I can go on and on. It's completely biased. All they did was put their favorites, but they made sure to sneak in a few other names here and there so it doesn't look that like it's biased.
It's time to talk fantasy football.
Okay, so overrated players in fantasy football. So I'm gonna actually start out with Baker Mayfield. He's, I'm in a league where, yes, they will draft, Baker Mayfield, kind of mid to late rounds, and rightfully so. But then they'll treat Baker Mayfield like he's undroppable. And so I know that there are other leagues, just like the league that I'm in, that, when it comes to the draft, they don't want to draft Baker Mayfield too high, but then they treat him like he's undroppable. Come on. Baker Mayfield, he is a good quarterback, but he's a quarterback that you should be, week to week, looking at the matchup. Just looking at that matchup, week to week. He's not a quarterback that you should, look at and be like, oh yeah, he's definitely starting, every single week. He's not a Joe Burrow that when Joe Burrow is healthy, he is obviously going to be started every week because he's that consistent. He's not a Josh Allen that is just every single week he is going to be, doing his thing, getting fantasy points, getting touchdowns, things like that. There's, and Baker Mayfield is going to be more consistent than C.J. Strauss and Jordan Love and quarterbacks like that, but he's still not, for fantasy, he can be on the waiver wire, from time to time. Why, have him, starting every single week? It's just, he's not one of those quarterbacks that you should be starting every single week. Regardless of how good he is, he's just not consistent enough to start every single week. There's only a few quarterbacks that should be starting week in and week out. Another player that pops into my mind is Aaron Jones. He is a very good running back, but you got to realize that fantasy football is different than the NFL. And so, Aaron Jones, he's not consistent enough to be drafted high. He's more like a 6th round draft pick, or he should be. And so many times than not, fantasy leagues like to draft him maybe in the 2nd round, 3rd round, or maybe there might be some that are a little smarter and draft him 4th round, and I can kind of see 4th round-ish, but I mean, he's still way too overrated in fantasy football. He's way too inconsistent. It's not that there's going to be games where he does get 20 plus points or 15 plus, but he's way too inconsistent for you to value him at the third round or fourth round, definitely second round, or I've been in situations where teams don't want to trade him. Like you will ask to trade him, and they say, well, he's too valuable to trade. Really? He's not that, like, just completely overrated player. And so I just have to say that. And then lastly, in fantasy football, stop hoarding quarterbacks. Do not hoard quarterback. Just go out, draft one quarterback. That's really all you need. Like, yes, it hurts to, so like if you go out and draft like a quarterback like Joe Burrow or Josh Allen, and you want to play them week in and week out, and then go get a quarterback off of the waiver wire during their bye week, and you still want to keep them, fine. Keep them so that way, after the bye week, you can go back. Fine. That's fine. But, go out and draft a Bo Nix. But if you draft a Bo Nix or a Dak Prescott, or, you draft a Baker Mayfield, why do you have to go out and get, other quarterbacks? Okay, they're good, but you can miss out on them, from time to time. You can, from time to time, go to the waiver wire and pick up, quarterbacks. Those types of quarterbacks are not quarterbacks that you want to keep on your roster. And look, why hoard quarterbacks when there is a waiver wire? I've heard the argument, and this is coming from the league that I'm in, I've heard the argument that you want to stack your quarterback so that way, that way you have, plenty of quarterbacks to choose from. But look, one, I will say to that argument, if you stick with one quarterback, if you draft one quarterback, you got a huge list of quarterbacks from the waiver wire that you can go to, versus if you draft a quarterback and then later you draft like 3 other quarterbacks, well, you might have 4 quarterbacks that you can go to week in and week out and look at the matchup there and be like, depending on the matchup, you can start, different quarterbacks, but there's only 4 there on that list. Opposed to where if you only draft one, if each fantasy owner in your league only drafts one quarterback, the list for the waiver wire list, you're going to have, each week, you're going to have more than 4 quarterbacks to choose from. So that's my first argument against that. And then it just, if you can go out to the waiver wire each and every week, why would you hoard quarterbacks? It just, these fantasy owners that hoard quarterbacks, they know that there's going to be people in their league that are going to want to trade maybe a receiver or a running back for a quarterback. And it's mainly just they're trying to get trade bait, is what they're, trying to do. Perhaps trade bait, perhaps, and just, other excuses. And so, but really there's no need. There's no need to hoard quarterbacks. So I have to just say, stop hoarding quarterbacks in your fantasy league. Every league needs to stop hoarding quarterbacks. It just stop. Just stop hoarding those quarterbacks. And then it does actually, my last point, it takes away, so I'm in a league that pushes for people to go to the waiver wire. But, if you're a league that pushes people to go to the waiver wire, but you're hoarding quarterbacks, the league is hoarding quarterbacks, well, that's part of the issue of why so many teams in that league don't go to the waiver wire. Because every team is just hoarding their quarterbacks, have like 3 to 4 quarterbacks. So nobody in that, in that league feels the need to go to the waiver wire every week. I mean, so you just, those things, if you're a league that pushes people, that you want people to go to the waiver wire week in and week out, why don't you address the real problem with that league and stop that league from hoarding quarterbacks?